So I'm going to be talking a bit about, in addition to tangible objects, intangible objects, a bit in the morning. The Linked Irish Traditional Music, or LITMUS project, is happening now at the Irish Traditional Music Archive, and I'm leading the project. I'm going to be discussing, in addition to just an overview, I want to talk a bit about ITMA and our users and why we have certain goals in mind for the ontology development, and also a bit more about representing the different types of relationships present in traditional Irish music and dance. And then a few examples that are being used to develop the ontology, and an idea for the future as well. So just a bit about LITMUS. We are involved in a linked data project. This focuses on the development of an ontology that's going to be unique for traditional music and dance, and it's going to really focus on trying to represent some of these more complex relationships that really deal with person-to-person passing on of a musical tradition that's still very central to how the music is practiced. And so we're hoping to use our eventual ontology in an implementation that would facilitate exploration by a variety of audiences, academic and practitioner, usually a combination of the two, and help people to make connections, therefore generating new knowledge from these discoveries of relationships that were previously unknown to the individual, and also making what we produce available for eventual reuse. So we have a variety of objects in our collection. We have published and unpublished material. So in addition to being an archive, we are also a library, and in some ways a museum as well. We've got commercial and non-commercial recordings in many different formats, from cylinder, wax cylinders, reel-to-reels, to MIDI, and born digital objects, lots of moving image and multimedia. And we have physical objects as well, like dance costumes, and we have a musical instrument collection of about 6 instruments, such as a box fiddle and a wire-strung harp, and a melodeon, which is a slightly smaller and slightly less complex accordion-type instrument. So in addition, there's considerations for this type of collection that we're keeping in mind throughout this project. That is, we need to make sure that we can represent preservation information for archival material, that this is not just about a collection or a catalog, but it's about a living tradition. And so trying to represent something that is very much ongoing and based in practice, and also making sure that, in addition to the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland, that we're looking at the diaspora as well. So, and our rights statements, we're intrigued and considering incorporating into our catalog and potentially into a future linked data implementation, the traditional knowledge rights statements that were developed primarily in America and in a partnership situation recently launched by the Library of Congress over there. And I've included the one down below, traditional knowledge verified, as one example of something we might like to consider incorporating into our other rights statements. And as I mentioned already, we have a variety of users and audiences to consider. So this is important because you want to use terminology that's grounded in, as much as possible, in the practitioner's own words. So we've got many different academic communities to consider. We've got a more general audience that's interested in traditional music as cultural heritage, as representation of their local place, as family history. And there are many academic practitioners, so people who are active performers of the music and dance. They're also academics in different capacities. So there's a lot of overlap between the needs of a performer and teacher and the needs of an academic researcher, the needs for making connections between geographic places and family connections and those types of relationships. And so we have a number of things happening to better understand our audiences and their needs, which I won't get into, but just to mention that that's also ongoing and informing the ontology as it happens, such as strategic planning and user assessments and surveys. And so we've got some exemplar queries that are being used to develop the ontology, and this is to really help us engage with the audiences and to make sure that what we're doing is tailored to their needs. So again, locality and geographic place are very important. So who are the musicians potentially associated with this county or this locality? These are just a few questions in each category. And to the specific, how is this particular tune or air or song related to this other tune or air or song? Contextual problems and stories such as, background information, anecdotes, poems, or literature or historic events associated with particular tunes or songs. And then the published collections question, which tunes or songs are represented in which published collections. And then, of course, you can get into how are they different or related to one another. So a bit more about relationships. For those of you maybe not as familiar with linked data, I just have a very brief slide here to give an overview. And the two individuals that I've chosen are, so on the left you see James Kelly. He is a traditional Irish musician, fiddle player from Dublin. His family is from Clare, both his mother and father. His father is on the right, John Kelly Sr., who is a very well renowned fiddle and concertina player and was a member of Kilturry Cualann, which is a group that eventually formed the Chieftains. He was a big influence on a number of musicians and is highly regarded. His son James is also a world-renowned fiddle player. He now lives in Miami, Florida, and as I am originally from Florida in the United States, I studied with him, so this is a personal relationship that I've chosen here. And I know quite a bit about the nuances of their relationship, so I wanted to just give a few examples. The two of them have recorded with one another, and they've played in a band together, another group called Kilturry Lion, or Musicians of Leinster. So there are a few influences that I've chosen to represent as well. Of course, I already told you that James is the son of John Kelly Sr., but specifically, the ornamentation of James's father, his repertoire is heavily influenced by his father as well. So in linked data, it's a matter of making sure that there are unique identifiers for people and identifiers for these relationships that you would like to state. So I've chosen to just take a portion, or you would say a superclass maybe, of this particular relationship. Ornamentation influenced by, repertoire influenced by. I've just given influenced by, which is available at this URL, or at least was. And the identifiers disambiguate. They make a point of specifying which James Kelly or John Kelly out of all of the people in the world with that particular name. And it links to an authority file. So working on these relationships, I'm developing properties using commercial album notes, which span a good number of years, from 1962 to 2012. And this was chosen because I can get a wide variety of instrumentation, including song, and I can represent a wide variety of geographic places and solos and duets and band albums as well. So the album notes were used to, as an example here, to look at relationships that are important for musicians to pass along to one another. And this is very much also reflected in, if you were to listen to a concert performance of traditional music, these are the types of phrases that would be said as well. So they reflect what would happen in person as well. So getting a tune from someone, someone being known to play a tune, having no name for something, getting something from the playing of someone else. So attributing your source in a very particular way, crediting a tune, not necessarily as a full composition. Sometimes it can be a personalized variation. So you have to sort of go beneath the surface a bit at times to determine exactly the specificity of the relationship, and alternate titles for things, alternate names or nicknames for individuals, instruments played, that type of information. So this is an excerpt from liner notes written by James Kelly. I just happened to pick that out. And the CD was issued in 2012, but the material is much older than that. So these are more contemporary notes on an older recording. But that's kind of an exception. Many of the albums that I used are, the notes were written at the time of the recording. So just a short excerpt. I've been sourcing the quotes from the albums, and this is just a reduced column display of what I've been working with, to take something such as he entitled it, and rather than saying this is the title, trying to say instead that someone gave the title as. So you're not defining a single title, defining a single authoritative version of a tune, which really is impossible to do. It's very important to attribute things to individuals and to people as much as possible. So again, referencing other types of events in the past, or other types of works or objects, referencing a folk tale, saying when you first heard something, I first heard this tune from the playing of, that's important information too. And so this is still in progress. There's about 31 that I've been working on so far, to go through and to eventually condense these properties down, so that there aren't too many duplicates or variants. So again, I'm in the process of refining these using OpenRefine, so I can eventually map outward from that. And I want to make sure that I note where I'm getting the sources for each of these properties. And most importantly, too, the language I'm really trying to keep as practitioner-centered as possible. And I do want to stress as well that I think the properties could be quite useful for other traditional musics, and so I'm focusing a lot of energy on that. A few exemplar graphs that I'm using to develop the, to kind of further develop the ontology model on the whole. So taking really complex examples from traditional music and trying to create a full graph of what these would look like. And so one of the chosen examples is an air that was published by Petrie and given no title, but it's been since titled many things, one of which is Danny Boy or the Londonderry Air. Many words, lyrics, poems set to this air, published as the song with the title or published as lyrics and the air referenced then in the published poem. So there's also a link, a bit of a tenuous link, but a scholarly theory that this was also related to a melody published in the Edward Bunting collection from the Belfast Harp Festival of 1792. And so we've got a number of objects that relate to this particular air. The one that I've displayed here is from Pádraig O'Keeffe, who's a fiddle player in the County Kerry, Sliabh-Luachra area, and he developed his own notation for notating fiddle tunes. So instead of on the staff, he imagines the 4 strings of the fiddle as the spaces, and he writes in the spaces the finger number. And so there's actually a pickup here, 0301, dun 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 dun. So you can, imagine the beginning of the air, and the dots to represent sustain. So it's an interesting form of notation that he's developed, and we've got his manuscripts in our collection. So while you can't read this graph, it's still very much in development, and this is a partial graph. It's too big to fit into one slide. But the idea of melodic clusters are very important because I've got a number of, I've got 2 main melodic clusters for this, and then the many different versions and different publications of those versions to reference, as well as a lyric cluster. And so eventually this will inform a master ontology graph with melodic clusters and poem clusters, as well as different types of contexts and different objects as well. The second exemplar is On Lon Dubh, which is the blackbird, and this is a song now played mostly as an instrumental air, but started out as a song as well. And so there are numerous examples in our collection for this as well, but it's represented both as an unmetered piece of music, as metered dance tunes, as different types of metered dance tunes, and as different types of dances. So it's a very rich example as well, and this is just a bit of dance notation by Michael Tubridy. We've got a link between this dance notation and the dance tutorials that he and his wife, Celine Tubridy, developed, and this is available on our YouTube channel, and it's also in our digital library. And so there's a nice link between the notated and the broken down steps with spoken steps as well. So in our online tune resource port, we've got several representations of the blackbird, and you can listen to the score here. If you're not fluent in reading music, we have a number of traditional musicians that don't read staff notation, and so you can listen to the score using Sound Slice and hear a MIDI file, and actually hear excerpts if you want. Which brings me to part. So it's a tune resource that focuses on many manuscript collections that have been digitally translated and made available in this clean notation, and available also to hear, and in some cases available for with video as well. So our P.W. Joyce collection now has video. What we'd like to do is potentially look at the Francis O'Neill collection of published tunes, which is more recent than a lot of the ones on there now, but out of copyright. And the full corpus is over 1,000 tunes, but it's a very relevant resource for today's musicians. O'Neill's is something that traditional musicians are likely to have on their shelf. So we'd like to make this digitally available and also start the process of relating the different digital manuscript collections to one another through linked data. And so we'd like to begin with a test set of 100 tunes and eventually look at incorporating the full corpus online. So, thank you.